Hello, this is David G. Truck, and welcome to Pig on the Wall. This is a brief introduction to this project and this podcast, so if you hate introductory bullshit, stuff like this...
And the people did feast upon the lambs, and sloths, and carp, and anchovies, and orangutans, and breakfast cereals, and fruit bats.
Then follow Brother Maynard's advice, and
skip
a bit, brother.
And go ahead and skip to any episode at all. They are all meant to be independent. But if you like introductory bullshit, here we go. 45,000 years ago, on the island of Indonesia. Deep within a cave. I'm in a cave now. You can hear it. I kind of hate caves, but I need to go into a cave for this intro. It's both literal and symbolic, as you'll understand momentarily. I'd rather be on a boat, of course.
I'm on a boat! I'm on a boat! Everybody look at me, cause I'm sailing on a boat!
Because caves are damp and have blind creatures scurrying around, and 45,000 years ago, there was also megafauna in caves, giant sloths and saber-toothed tigers. But anyway, here we are in a cave, and someone painted something on the cave wall. Someone nameless, they did not sign this work of art, and I'm actually imagining several people inside this cave. A torchbearer, and perhaps someone handing the artist materials, an assistant, and there's someone standing lookout, watching for cave bears. And anyway, this artist painted a pig on the wall, a warty pig with some red ochre pigment. It's a big fat pig with little stick legs and a small head, and there's a stencil of a hand next to it. Maybe this serves as a signature. Who knows? Okay, let me just climb through here. Okay, back into the light, back into the Indonesian jungle. So these ancient cave paintings, these first figurative paintings, paintings of a scene, they stretch back even farther than 45,000 years. Recently, an even older cave painting was discovered in another Indonesian cave. This painting features a scene with three half-human, half-animal hybrid creatures, very Dr. Moreau, and of course, a pig. It seems humans have loved pigs for a very long time, or at least painting pigs and eating pigs. Homer Simpson expresses this best, our love of this fabulous animal, when his daughter Lisa decides to become a vegetarian.
Wait a minute. Lisa, honey, are you saying you're never going to eat any animal again? What about bacon?
No.
Ham?
No.
Pork chop?
Dad, those all come from the same animal.
Oh, yeah, right, Lisa. A wonderful, magical animal.
So even before humans had this brilliant idea to paint pigs on cave walls, there were still cave paintings. Cave painting was part of a whole ancient practice that started with abstract patterns, dots, and lines, and those beautiful hand stencils in Spain, probably made over 60,000 years ago by Neanderthals. These ancient humans, they experimented with various materials to make paints, ochre and charcoal and manganese. They mixed them with various binding agents, sap and animal fat to try to get the paint to stick to the cave wall, and they applied the paint with tubes and hair and moss brushes. And though I'm speculating, I'm sure there were moments of experimentation and mimicry, moments of cooperation and competition, going deeper into caves, trying different compositions, and this process, this chain of artistic progress, eventually led to the incredible and beautiful cave paintings of realistic animals and hunting scenes, such as in Lascaux, France, and Altamira, Spain. Now let's make like Brother Maynard and skip a bit and head to the agricultural revolution, 10,000 years ago, and people were more stationary then. There was less nomadic hunting and gathering, and people started painting on slabs of stone, and on pottery, and on the walls of buildings, and this art was much more public than paintings in the dark, dank depths of caves, and so art progressed at a much faster rate because it was more visible. And now, once again, we'll skip a few thousand years to 1255 BC and talk about one of the most lavishly decorated tombs of antiquity. And 25 years ago, I was lucky enough to see inside this tomb, the tomb of Nefertari near Luxor. It's known as the Sistine Chapel of ancient Egypt. They only let a handful of people in each day, and you really get a glimpse of what ancient Egypt actually looked like 3,000 years ago. Because when you see the pyramids and the Valley of the Kings and all the stuff in Luxor, you're seeing a degraded, worn, and polluted monochromatic version of Egypt. The sandstone is being worn away by air pollution as you look at it. But if you get into the tomb of Nefertari, you don't have to imagine what these things used to look like. This tomb was sealed for thousands of years in the arid, dry desert. And then it was opened up in the early 1900s, but then they closed it down to prevent damage, and it wasn't open again until 1995. So every surface and hieroglyphic is painted, and the paint is perfectly preserved. Every hieroglyphic is a tiny little painting, and the larger bas-reliefs are incredibly bright and detailed. Isis and winged snake gods and leopards and ibis and egrets and herons and crocodiles, all in brilliant Technicolor. They only let in 150 people a day, and now that I've seen it, I think they should do the prudent thing and completely close it to the public, so the colors don't fade, and so nobody else gets to go inside. Which might sound like a terrible sentiment, but you get it. I'm not Jesus. I mean, Jesus has that whole thing, whoever has 2 tunics should share with him who has no tunics. And maybe with tunics I would share, but with a special experience, it's much more fun if less people have had that experience. Okay, back to the condensed history lesson. This sequence, from painting in caves to painting in tombs, and then painting hieroglyphics and painting pottery and painting on stone buildings, eventually led to painting frescoes in wet plaster, the Sistine Chapel and the Last Supper, and then finally to painting on wooden triptychs and on canvas, and painting with pixels on computer screens, and AI painting with ones and zeros inside a computer. And this chain of incremental progress is what this podcast is all about. We must never break this chain of incremental progress, because it occasionally sets us up to leap incredibly high.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And that's what this podcast will examine. These small steps and giant leaps that lead to most excellent human achievements.
Excellent!
While I'll certainly be focusing on great works of art. For example, my first set of episodes is about William Shakespeare's Hamlet, but I think any amazing piece of human artistry or achievement is fair game. Why not? I can cast a wide net if I like. You might know the old Polish proverb, not my circus, not my monkeys. Well, this podcast, it's the reverse. It is my circus, and these are my monkeys. The circus is the podcast, I guess, in the analogy, and the monkeys are all my crazy thoughts climbing around inside my head. Anyway, I will take a look at this great accomplishment, something that I believe is a real keeper, an amazing human achievement, and I will put it into context. Look at what makes it tick and how it came to be. And quite honestly, how most great art and achievement is the result of a cauldron of collaboration and competition, a stew of various influences. Some of these influences credited and apparent, some of them hidden and obscure. And serendipity, of course. The serendipity of certain people coming together to create a scene, like the jazz scene in New York City in the 1940s and 1950s, the competitive scene on 52nd Street, when the speakeasies became smoky jazz clubs, and guys like John Coltrane and Bill Evans and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and, of course, Miles Davis all played together, competing and collaborating and trading ideas, and music like this hard bop, that's time will tell. Art Blakey, the drummer and band leader of Art Blakey and the Messengers, this influential jazz musician who performed in the 50s at Birdland and in Midtown Manhattan, at the Cafe Bohemia, all those places, and he's with all these great musicians playing this new kind of improvisational music, and this eventually evolves into masterpieces like this. That's Miles Davis and Bill Evans on So What from the Miles Davis album Kind of Blue, perhaps the most famous and best-selling jazz album of all time, the preeminent modal jazz album, slow chord changes and complex note-by-note melodies. So you get that kind of jazz, but you also get this album and this kind of jazz from the same scene. That's John Coltrane on the tenor saxophone, Giant Steps from 1960, a year after Kind of Blue. And this album is the pinnacle of hard bop complexity. It's all about rapid chord changes instead of note-by-note melodies like Miles Davis on Kind of Blue. 26 chords over 16 measures, and they're not even closely related chords. They're now known as the Coltrane changes. So the same scene produces masterpieces with opposite structure. Who influenced who? Who came up with what? Who is responsible for these styles from start to finish? Who knows? There were so many great musicians experimenting in so many ways that in 1950s and 60s jazz, it's difficult to trace the artistic journey and evolution of any one particular person or style. It was an incredible time, but it's also kind of disheartening because if you didn't have a scene like this, you could have loads of talent, but if you didn't have this scene to compete and collaborate in, then you might not end up progressing very far. You might just end up as one of the many skilled artists that emulate and reach technical virtuosity, but don't necessarily progress the art, take that giant leap forward, form an invaluable link in the chain. You might just end up being another YouTube guitar shredder or SoundCloud rapper, indiscernible from the rest. You need to get a bit lucky, like the members of the Beatles did in Liverpool in 1957, when John Lennon and his skiffle band, the Quarrymen, were playing at a church event, and John met Paul McCartney. And everybody had a skiffle band back then. It was this sort of primitive blues folk music with homemade instruments like kazoos and washboards. And then Paul brings in George Harrison, even though George Harrison's only 14 years old. So it's this happy accident that these three get together playing skiffle music. And then, before they played all those gigs in Germany as the Beatles, they ran through a bunch of dumb names. Johnny and the Moondogs, Page 3, a combination of their names, John, Paul, and George, the Quarrymen, of course, the Rainbows, the Nurk Twins. Would they have become as famous if they were called Johnny and the Moondogs instead of the Beatles? In Rob Reiner's epic satirical rockumentary Spinal Tap, he has a scene where the guys from the band satirize this serendipity when they explain how the band formed, the skiffle origins, the various awful names, the lineup changes, and the serendipity that made them become the most famous satirical rock band in the world.
Talk a little bit about the history of the group. I understand, Nigel, you and David originally started the band back in, when was it, 1964?
Well, before that we were in different groups. I was in a group called the Creatures, which was a skiffle group.
I was in Lovely Lads,
yeah.
And then we looked at each other and said, well, we might as well join up, you know, and...
So we became the Originals.
Right.
And we had to change our name, actually.
Well, there's another group in the East End called the Originals, and we had to rename ourselves.
The New Originals.
New Originals,
yeah.
And then they became...
The Regulars. They changed their name back to the Regulars, and we thought, well, we could go back to the Originals, but what's the point?
We became the Thamesmen at that point.
And of course, the requisite drama with drummers. They seem to be the most replaced and troubled members of rock bands. Keith Moon with The Who, Steve Adler, Guns N' Roses, Phil Taylor from Motorhead, Stan Lynch with Tom Petty, and John Stumpy Pepys.
Your first drummer was...
the Beeper.
John Stumpy Pepys.
Oh, yeah.
Great, tall, blonde geek with glasses.
Yeah. Good drummer.
Great look, good drummer.
Good drummer.
Fine.
What happened to him?
He died. He died in a bizarre gardening accident some years back.
It's really one of those things. It was, you know, the authorities said, you know, best leave it, you know,
not
unsolved, really. You know.
And he was replaced by...
Stumpy Joe. Eric Stumpy Joe Childs.
And what happened to Stumpy Joe?
Well, it's not a very pleasant story, but
he's passed on.
He died. He choked on. The official explanation was he choked on vomit. It was actually
away.
It was actually someone else's vomit. It was not.
Ugly.
You know, there's no real.
Well, they can't prove whose vomit it was. They don't have facilities in Scotland Yard to
You
print
can't really dust for vomit.
So anyway, back to the Beatles. Ringo Starr replaced George Best, not because George Best drowned on someone else's vomit or died in a bizarre gardening accident, but because George Martin, the Beatles producer, suggested this change, and the rest is history. But the point is, you need to meet the right people with the right chemistry to do something great. As Paul McCartney readily admits,
Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends.
and even if your friend group is John, Ringo, Paul, and George, you still need to have the right producer. You still need George Martin, the fifth Beatle, who took all this raw talent and transformed it and helped it along. He was formally trained, he was willing to experiment with tape loops and strange sounds and orchestral arrangements and oddball beginnings and endings to songs, and like I said, he suggested the addition of Ringo Starr as Pete Best's replacement. So like with those cave paintings, there's other people besides the artist. Someone had to hold the torch, light up the cave. It sounds very much like Plato's allegory of the cave, and I am not going back inside the cave again to explain this, because I truly hate caves. They are slimy. But we're fumbling around in the dark, looking at the shadows in Plato's allegory, but the more people we have to light things up, the better chance we have of perceiving some bits of reality. The more people we have holding torches and enlightening us to what they have seen. You're probably familiar with the Isaac Newton quotation, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," right? He wrote this in 1676, but this idea of seeing further because you're standing on the shoulders of someone else, this didn't entirely originate with Newton, just as the ideas for the calculus weren't entirely his. He was a genius, of course, but he had help from his teacher, John Barrow, and Leibniz was independently coming up with these calculus ideas as well. So with this quotation, in 1159, 500 years before the Newton quotation, John of Salisbury wrote down a similar metaphor, but John of Salisbury said it was originally from Bernard of Chartres, and the original quote was, "We are like dwarfs, perched on the shoulders of giants. We see more and things that are more distant than they did, not because our sight is superior or because we are taller than they, but because they raise us up and by their great stature add to ours." Now, Isaac Newton certainly improved upon and condensed that prolix quotation. "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," is much more elegant, as mathematicians say, but he got the idea from somewhere, and these are the stories I want to tell. I want to look at how great things are made, that chain of influences and ideas that produce them. And as I mentioned previously, I am starting ambitiously with Hamlet.
Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune,
Or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing in them.
And while Hamlet is going to take multiple episodes to examine, I'm going to make each one independent enough so that you can jump in wherever you like. Shakespeare is, of course, someone who loved to borrow ideas from other people and then greatly improve upon them. He took what was available to him and he made it And while I'd also like to do an episode on Shakespeare's Henry IV and an episode on modern art and Mondrian, I'm not only going to do highbrow stuff. I've got some episodes on pop music planned, and I'd like to do something on aqueducts and the evolution of the infrastructure that provides us with
fresh, pure water to replenish our precious bodily fluids. Are you beginning to understand?
Are you beginning to understand? Maybe not, but you'll get it. I'd like to do something on the early days of video on the internet, the dawn of memes, this kind of stuff. Maybe I'll do something on the dynamism of NFL offensive systems, the evolution of the pass-first West Coast offense. Who knows? It's my circus and my monkeys. But I'm hoping to make this an eclectic, unpredictable, and triumphant journey, a celebration of human creativity and enlightenment and cooperation. I know it's the dawn of the age of AI, and human creativity and thinking may very well be obsolete soon. But I want to make this podcast a reminder of the power of human interaction, a celebration of the things we've done and made and assembled from various scraps and pieces, the way magpies and bowerbirds operate, but with thoughts and words and ideas, a positive look at people in these often negative times. And as a bonus, if you tune in, I promise you,
Total consciousness.
So you've got that going for you. Okay, enough introductory bullshit. This is Dave G. Truck, signing off until next time. Take it easy.